have our schedule, of course, to show you what we have coming up. Next week, we actually have a talk from UOP, and they'll talk about their pharmacy program, so make sure you look out for that. And then we have a MAPS presentation coming up on October 3rd. This is one of our NASA speakers, so that will be at Sierra Hall, with everything's West Campus, right? And then our next science night is also on October 3rd, and be on the lookout for that. It's going to be more, they're going to have the Haunted Museum and all of the fun Halloween stuff. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on to our speaker today, and I'll let him take over. So we'll just get the slides ready. Wait.
It's a cam.
There we go. All right, let's give it up for Edgar Perez-Lopez.
Okay, so my name is Edgar Perez-Lopez. I'm a professor here at Modesto Junior College, teaching in the engineering department. And I also work across the street at the building that has the giant M. We're called Muga. We're a German company, and our company is Girling Applied Engineering, to be exact. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about something I've been obsessed with for about 7 years now. And a little bit about my job that kind of deals with my obsession. And so the title of this talk is going to be May the Fields Be With You, Microwave Power and the Plasma Frontier. And yes, I am a Star Wars geek, so I had to kind of involve that in here because plasma does have to deal with space, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But the first thing I wanted to do is mention that some of the things I'm going to talk about are a little bit dry, a little bit boring, you would say, but they will add up into a nice, pretty picture. I will try to introduce essentially where we get our power or our energy to essentially create a plasma and or to heat in a microwave, and then I will define some of the applications that we see on our everyday life. And then I will mention a few things that are involved in research and how you can get involved within that research. And so as I'm going along, I know that some of these things are going to seem a little bit abstract. And so the way I like to kind of have talks is I don't mind talking to the audience. So as I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. That is totally fine. I hope that's okay with you. I like to have conversations and get your input on whatever it is that I'm talking about. So without further ado, I want to begin by talking about electromagnetic radiation and what exactly it is. For those that are doing engineering, physics, you probably already took or will take a course on electromagnetism. And so what this essentially tells us is that there is a relationship between an electric and a magnetic field. What is that? What does that mean exactly? Well, on our everyday lives, it means that your phone is currently communicating at a specific frequency, and that frequency is in a form of a wave that travels from one location, the tower that's on this side of campus, to your phone. And it's literally a shape of a wave that looks similar to this, where you have a magnetic field perpendicular to an electric field. And I know that that's a lot, but I need to define this so that we kind of have an idea of what is going on. In your microwave, not the light itself, but within your microwave, there is an apparatus called a magnetron that emits these electromagnetic waves. And the shape of your microwave is essentially the vessel in which that wave is propagated inside of it and allows for the heating. In addition to that, the energy in the form of this wave is time varying, so it's not always perfect, at least in current technology. And as I mentioned earlier, they're perpendicular to each other. These waves can change minutely, and that is called a phase. But again, more importantly is that there's an understanding that it's not just an electric wave itself or an electric field, and it's not just a magnetic field, it's a combination of both things. And that's important because what I'll talk about with regards to plasmas deal not only with electrical power, but also magnetic waves that are induced in both. And so the three equations, and for those that want to go look at the math, that we utilize for this, or the theory, is Gauss's law for electric and magnetic fields, Faraday's law for induction, and Ampere's law for current. So those that want to go check out the equations and see what they mean, I will, again, let you kind of go look for those. The next part is when your microwave is heating up the food, there are losses that occur to heat up your food. Sometimes the food comes out cold, depending on the type of plate that you utilize, correct? And this is what we call a dielectric loss. which is essentially through either the insulating material that the plate itself is made of, or if your magnetron, the thing that propagates the electromagnetic radiation, is not working properly, you might have magnetic losses. And lastly, if you start messing with your microwave space, let's say you get angry at it and kind of smack it because it's not working, that can also cause ohmic losses, which essentially resist the electrical flow inside of the microwave itself. Or like in a current case, if your dog chews on a cable and there's not enough current going through it, that can also cause losses within your system overall. And so one of the things to consider is that the heating best occurs for dipolar molecules. And again, I know this is kind of more on the science base, but a dipolar molecule essentially has both a positive and a negative, and they interact with the magnetic field in the similar manner. So if you have a positive and a negative will push a negative towards one direction and vice versa. And we also have this energy loss due to friction from the rapid reorientation due to the field propagating at a very fast rate. And so that fast rate is essentially the frequency that your magnetron inside of your microwave is propagating. And the last thing I want to go over again, so that we get the fundamentals, is the actual heating itself. There's volumetric heating, which unlike surface heating that we kind of messed with already on the last slide, this occurs within inside of the material itself rather than the conductive material. So in your microwave, again, you have a box shape, and that box shape is essentially what dictates how the electromagnetic radiation will propagate inside of your microwave. I'm sure some of you know already that the highest point of heating is on the outer circle of the plate that's inside of your microwave. And so this is already dictated by the microwave itself. And so when you're heating something that's not the surface itself, you can think about it as the actual food itself being what is being heated. So when there's just essentially something with water, the molecules inside of that water, or inside of the whatever food it is that contains the water, begin to propagate in a different direction depending on the electromagnetic radiation, and that produces the temperature to increase. And so how is that temperature increase essentially done is by this equation here. And so whatever power it is that we're inputting is dictated by this, and it deals with the dielectric properties of the material, again, the frequency and all that good stuff. And so the uniformity of the heating itself, or how good your microwave is dependent on the type of material that you have and whether the entire thing that you're heating is made of that same material. The response to dielectric properties, so if you put in a plastic or a paper plate versus something that's made of ceramic, and the electric field, whether you're passing all the electricity from your plug to your microwave. Okay, so I know that was a lot of dry. I see one person asleep already, that's all good. That's what it was for. So my bread and butter specifically deals with the fourth state of matter, or what a lot of scientists consider the fourth state of matter. And so what is that? Well, first, if you take a solid like an iceberg or an ice cube from your fridge and you give it some sort of energy, let's say it's electrical or heat energy, you obtain a solid. And we see this every day when you're maybe pour ice cubes in a cup, they begin to melt, and so you get a liquid. If you leave it long enough, it becomes a complete liquid. And if it's a small amount of volume and you leave it in a pretty hot environment, like outside of the classroom, then it turns into a vapor or a gas, correct? And so throughout this time, all we've done is increase the amount of energy that we've input into that system in the form of heat or electricity. And so the question becomes, what happens if I put more energy into the system? And again, that's essentially where we're going to. So does the gas disappear, or do we get some form of a mixture? And so my PhD focused on essentially discovering this or exploring it further than I ever thought I would, really. And so what happens when you have enough of this energy is you get this plasma, or again, we consider it the fourth state of matter. And the plasma itself is made up of neutrals, which include atoms, molecules, and radicals. Ionized gas, for those that are chemists, this is more or less for you. Ionized gas, which consists of positive and negative ions, electrons, which are extremely hot, and then you have also other properties such as UV light that's emitted, exomers, visible light, which is how we end up seeing the plasma. And some of the properties of it is that it's highly electrically conductive, and it's electrically neutral. So quasi-neutrality exists within the plasma itself. And so I talked about it. I call it a soup. I like to call it a soup because, again, you can actually make the shape of the plasma whatever you like because it's controlled, again, by the propagation of these waves that we already discussed. Now, plasmas themselves, you're probably like, well, what is it and how can I play with these? Have I seen them in my real life? And the answer is yes. So a lighter is an example of plasma that's ignited using an igniter or a piece of metal. You have lightning, which is essentially a function of the high and low pressure systems of clouds that exist. And so you have that energy being released with the ground, which in cases creates a conductive bridge between the clouds and the floor itself. You have the electromagnetic wind that comes from the sun, which causes for us to see the aurora borealis and the aurora australis. So you have seen plasma, you know what plasma is. And it is important to recognize that all of these plasmas actually do have properties, as I mentioned earlier, not just in the fact that they're super hot, but they have chemistry. For example, in the form of lightning, plasma actually increases the amount of nutrients that are essentially injected in the earth when it strikes. And so in the early 1900s, scientists realized that in areas where lightning struck, there would be more plant growth, or the plants would grow at a much faster rate. In the sun itself, we have essentially fusion energy happening every single day, where you have two hydrogen atoms fusing every day and creating helium and exerting the amount of energy that we have today in our sun. And then lastly, for the aurora borealis, the electromagnetic wind itself is ionizing or breaking down the gas that is essentially at our atmosphere and creating this light. And so each one of these forms of plasma has a different function in not only space, but in our everyday lives. And lastly, again, just because I'm a Star Wars geek, in space, 99% of the observable universe is made out of plasma, or this ionized gas. And that is because there's always reactions happening in space. Whether you're forming a galaxy, a planet, or a star, these reactions are occurring, and there's energy that's being propagated from either a star or just in general deep in space. And so this field of plasma is something that, again, isn't taught in schools. I attended UC Merced, and there was no class on plasma. There was nothing except small lightning bolts that I saw in a beaker, and I'll show those shortly. But in short, the plasmas themselves exist not only in our real life that we see visibly, but also in the laboratory and outside of that. So here in this plot, and this just means electron density for those that don't know German. I don't know German myself, but that's what that means. This plot essentially gives us a little bit of information of how dense the plasma is, or how many electrons per unit volume exists within that, and what kind of things exist in our universe that essentially match that density and at what temperature they exist. And so why is the temperature important for plasmas? Well, if you think back to chemistry, again, there's a certain amount of energy necessary to break down chemicals. For example, forever chemicals that we call PFOA and PFOS are very prevalent here in the Central Valley, unfortunately. Those can be broken down with plasmas. And so the fact that these plasmas can generate not only the temperature, but a variety of chemistry is something that should be considered. And so I got obsessed again with this stuff back in right before grad school. I volunteered at a lab, and I saw a small beaker with a little lightning bolt, and for some reason it intrigued me, and I wanted to learn more. And so to give you an example of what that looked like, I'm hoping this video works. This is what I saw when I was maybe a few years ago, 2016 or 17. These little lightning bolts is what I saw inside of a tiny beaker, and it made me question things like, how is this possible in a beaker? Why is this lightning bolt here? How is it produced? And what can you do with it? Why are we doing this kind of research? So for a good 4 months, I conducted experiments not knowing what I was doing, and I was given what I call a Bible. It's a plasma chemistry book this thick. And I tried to learn it on my own. I began to kind of study the equations, which aside from what we learned already, there's a ton of them. And so I realized that this plasma stuff is very, very popular in not only science, but also in industry, the many capabilities that we can utilize it for. So on the top part, what we have is a plasma generated with microwave. And so that essentially is about 5 meters long, and it's you could think about it as maybe a giant rope of plasma that is essentially breaking down air. And so why do we break down air? And I'll get to that in a minute. But what I wanted to mention is that, again, my specialization is in mechanical engineering. And so my specialty in mechanical engineering is in thermal fluids. But the plasma chemistry and the plasma physics that I studied are both something that I did not, again, plan to, but realized that every single field is involved in this. So if you're studying here at Modesto Junior College, maybe you're studying material science, maybe you're studying electrical, chemical engineering, whatever form of engineering or STEM field you're in, there is room for you here. There is something you can do, including biology. It really has no bounds. And most of the things that we utilize plasma with are actually not even in actual engineering. Most of them are in manufacturing or production of something that already exists, and we're just making it maybe more sustainable or creating sustainability with plasma. And so now I'm going to switch over a little tiny bit and talk about what we do and my job and the research that we're kind of conducting with this plasma stuff. And so again, I've already mentioned we work for right across the street. You'll see this giant sign that's glowing at night. And I'll talk about that now with a combination of how these systems work. And so our systems, again, like your microwave, as opposed to having just a square shape, consist of that magnetron I mentioned earlier. And if you take apart your microwave, it looks like a light bulb, because that's essentially how electromagnetic radiation is currently transferred. And it travels in a wave, like the wave that we saw on the first slide, through this waveguide. It travels in a specific shape. We know what that shape of the wave is. And then it utilizes the antenna to transfer that energy to gas that's inside of a cavity. And that cavity then produces a plasma. What are some of the things that we do with this? We do chemical etching, which results in low physical damage, low thermal stress, and high selective etching. What does all of this mean? Well, if you look at your phone right now, the reason why it's so thin is because it was made with plasma. So we were able to control the plasma itself using radio frequency energy and essentially deposit millions, or if not billions, of transistors onto a wafer made of silicone. And so we're able to essentially now control this plasma up to an atomic level and even below that, so that we can create these tiny phones that we have now. In addition to making them thinner, our processors, our memory, our cameras, for those that TikTok, all of that is a function of our plasma and our plasma applications that have allowed us to develop this science further. So our microwave systems themselves are utilized in these kind of applications. Specifically, this one that we have here, we call it a remote plasma source, is utilized to clean these chambers that allow us to build these kind of structures on wafers. What else do we do? Well, we have this thing called Power 2X. Power 2X means that we pull electricity from some things, maybe a renewable source, maybe it's just a plug here, whatever it is that we're essentially using to pull power from our grid is what we end up talking about when it becomes power to X. And X is whatever you want it to be. So in industrial terms, what this means is that we're able to convert, using our plasma system, something like this, we're able to break down gases such as CH4 and carbon dioxide, which are both greenhouse gases, and turn them into various useful products. So in some cases, hydrogen or any sort of minerals and synthetic fuels, as well as other raw materials. And so this conversion of energy to other forms of products is a function of this plasma that we end up generating. And so I talk about this a lot because it's an upcoming technology that's not utilized everywhere. And we're in the Central Valley, where there's a lot of farming as well. And where there's farming, there's a lot of methane, right? That's something I've come to learn about the Central Valley. So, bless you. So, Moving on to methane. Methane itself can also be broken down into very useful products. Carbon, which can be transformed not just into carbon, but different forms of carbon that are utilized in different applications, such as developing new materials that are lighter and more durable than steel, and hydrogen, which is utilized as a fuel. And so there's a lot of applications for this in aerospace, in current technology that's being developed for automotive, as well as production of fuel for different companies that are using, for example, cement. Again, the process is really as robust as it seems. You put gas in because we know the definition of plasma now. It's essentially energizing the gas and producing this products. It's easy to integrate into existing infrastructures that already exist because all you need are these waveguides where the microwave propagates. And we're able to scale them down. So some of these systems, I can set one down in this table and we can work out with that. And some of our systems maybe require half of the room for us to be able to work on it. And depending on the type of application you have, you may have a collection unit or something else that's placed thereafter. Any questions so far? We're good, okay. Now, hydrocarbon transformation is what I talked about here. When you create the carbon itself, you can convert that into something else. So in some cases, this downstream source or something that's at low pressure can be used to transform some of these carbon figures into something that is more useful with respect to the application themselves. With some of the feedstock that can be fed, again, aside from methane, is light hydrocarbon gases. And after the plasma reactor itself, there's separation and purification of these products. Some of the production things that you can essentially have are acetylene and hydrogen free of carbon dioxide. For those that don't know, hydrogen has different flavors, you could call them, and it exists in various modes. And so the process itself is essentially where the research is for all of these things that I'm talking about, whether it's the breaking down of the methane or any greenhouse gases. This process here that we see here in the image is essentially where the research is and where essentially I think there's multiple opportunities for us to kind of continue working on here in the Central Valley. And again, as mentioned earlier, it's really as robust as it seems. You buy a power supply, you buy the source, you plug it in, and you begin feeding it gas. And then you work on the process. The process itself for any of our systems, there's only two things really that you can mess with, or three, I guess. There's the flow rate, which again, how much gas are you passing through, the combination of gases themselves within that, and the pressure itself, as well as the mechanisms that allow us to ignite this. So it's not really much you can change, but the research in that, it takes a lot of time. It requires a lot of studying with respect to chemistry. And once you understand the plasma characteristics themselves and what exactly we look for, then it makes life easier so that you don't have to do a PhD. That is hopefully the goal. Yes?
So at my previous job, I was working with dairies on sustainability, and most of them implemented digesters. So biogas digesters where they were capturing all the methane and going to a digester and burning it off. Is that like a similar process?
They might use natural gas for that, and so this takes the methane itself and breaks it down completely, and then you collect the product. So the methane itself isn't lost or isn't converted into anything else.
They were sending it on trucks to use it on their fuel for their trucks.
It might be that they converted it to hydrogen, but the process itself might not involve plasma, because all of these processes that I'm talking about right now can also be done using just microwave heating as well. And they can also be done, so if there's heating involved, it doesn't just have to be microwave. It could be natural gas that's burning and then converting that methane into other gases. So the process might be the same, but the way that it's done is different. So plasma systems are again just coming up, and especially at large scale, it's very difficult to have something like this set up at the moment. But I mean, I wouldn't doubt them having something already. What company did you say?
It was Nestle.
Oh no, they might already have something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But yes, that's a good question and a good point. That all of these systems, I know I'm presenting plasma, but it can also be something to do with microwave heating. So that's why I introduced it initially, because both applications, or all these applications that I'm bringing up, can be done through microwave heating as well. So now the next point that I'll talk about is the conversion of CO2 into carbon monoxide and O2. Why are carbon monoxide and oxygen important? Well, in our current technology for some of our cars, there's fuel cells. Fuel cells utilize both hydrogen and or carbon monoxide as the fuel to essentially power electronics. And so some of the products that you can have, like CO and O2, can still be used in other applications from something that's dirty, from CO2 essentially. And so in this case, for this, we were working with the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. We essentially had ceramic hollow fibers for O2 removal, and it allowed us to produce O2 and carbon monoxide. And so the project itself allowed us to produce very, 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 again, precise amounts and precise types of both O2 and CO with high yield rates. And as I mentioned earlier, plasma also, and again, microwave heating, both work at water contaminated with organic residues. I mentioned PFOS and PFOA that, again, rain heavily here in the Central Valley, unfortunately. We have systems that allow us to run water similar to this system here that has water running around it. And we calculate essentially what flow rates this plasma can remain ignited while passing water through it and decontaminating this type of contaminants within the water itself. In addition to PFOA, PFOS, you can think about other chemicals that are in your water that are dirty, and this essentially would get rid of them or, again, create derivatives of them that are less toxic than what they currently are. For those that don't know PFOA or PFOS, I'll explain a little bit on those. Older vehicles, the plastic that they were made of in the early 60s and 70s, the dashes, the handles, everything that was used during those times is made of PFOA and PFOS. Currently as well, there's certain plates in your house, plastic plates, plastic Tupperware, and other forms of things that you use on a daily basis that are made of plastic that may contain both PFOA and or PFOS. And so both of those are forever chemicals and can last up to past 50 years in terms of their half-life in the environment. So we have a lot of pick and pulls around here in the area. If those pick and pulls have these older vehicles, you're definitely going to have contamination of PFOS. And if they're run next to, let's say, the river, guess what? Now your water is contaminated with PFOS, which as part of my PhD, I was able to analyze, and there was a bit of PFOS and PFOA in the water here, as well as in the wells some of the wells here in Modesto, which again, I'm hoping that this becomes a big thing and we can all work together to kind of clean the water up and the environment. So yes, this is all real, that exists. It's in your backyard, it's everywhere. And what ends up happening is these microplastics end up going in your system, and it gives problems with pregnancy. It gives problems with your health overall. And if you already have health problems, it just makes it that much worse. So it isn't something fun to play with. It isn't something that is non-existent. It is very real. And so again, these systems allow us to break these things down and create not only the clean water, but essentially other chemicals that are less toxic to both us and the environment. And lastly, because we are in the Central Valley, again, my PhD focused on specifically this, the development or the creation of fertilizer using just air. So if you take air and you break it into its components, you'll have nitrogen and oxygen. That's what air is made of. And if you break that down with energy, you can create NH3 and HNO3, which are both used in the growth process of plants, whether it's something that you're working at home in your garden or in large production. These two things are essentially what your plants end up utilizing to increase growth rate. And of course, there's a specific percentage depending on the type of crop. There's a specific type of, there's one that maybe some plants take that others don't. And so the uptake is really dependent on the crop. But the point is that you can pull the air, literally pull the air that exists everywhere. And just using the system, you can break it down into these components that become reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen, create NH3 or HNO3, and the plant will absorb it and it will grow quicker. Now, I don't have pictures of the plants that I grew, but again, for these systems, so you can make one of these systems with just electricity for about, I would say, $600. And you can treat water for probably a good 2-3 years by just replacing the metallic electrode on it. That's essentially what I proved, is that these systems can be made with little to no money. The systems that I present here are essentially at a much larger scale. So if we're working with a farm, for example, this would be something that would be utilized by them. And if possible, hopefully one day, we would have farms that rise up as opposed to having a growth on soil. Since this already allows us to have this fertilizer, we can inject it directly into water. So this is already being done in Europe. There's a lot of rising farms, that's what they're calling them. And they utilize air and other mixtures of gases to obtain maximum growth of their crops. So again, the things I wrote here are essentially what I explained, that the plasma breaks down the air and creates this mixture of reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. And all that means is that these guys want to react with other chemicals and sometimes with themselves. And so if you mix them with water, you can get HNO3. If you just have the air alone, you'll have NH3. So, again, easy to set up on farms and easy to scale up.
What do they call the farms? Hydro?
They have hydroelectric farms. There's different types of farms. There's also, they call them like rising because they're stacked up, as well. Sorry, I need to drink water. Okay. I mentioned that our phones are also made with plasma, right? And typically, the plasma that we use to create the structures on our phone is called RF, or radio frequency, and it works at a different frequency than microwave does. So microwave works at 2.45 gigahertz, and the gigahertz that I'm speaking of are the same gigahertz that your phone has right now. Everybody here has 5G. That's exactly a similar analogy to this. In radio frequency, we use 13.56 megahertz, which is a much lower frequency, and it allows us to control the plasma again to the atomic level. In microwave, currently, because of the fact that we're essentially emitting it from a light bulb, kind of like in this classroom, we are able to essentially etch or dig away at material in all directions, which is great, but it would be great if we can control it directionally as well. So if we can do it from the top only, from the left, or for the right, which the research currently is kind of mixing both of the sources up and seeing if we can optimize this kind of process. So in the case of semiconductors, for those that are interested in chip production, we have isotropic plasma etching and anisotropic plasma etching. And both of these are, again, something that are studied very rigorously in our field. So, as I mentioned, there is research in this already. This is an RF-assisted microwave plasma source, and I've already talked about the source itself. And all we do on top of that, since we've already created a system, is we make a microwave. This microwave has your wafer or your silicone piece inside of it. And underneath that wafer, you have the chuck that holds it down, and essentially a source that feeds it electricity in the form of radio frequency. That allows us to control the ions or the atoms that we want to inject onto the wafer itself, and allows us to actually, again, make it so that it's more directional. And for this, unfortunately, there's not enough research for us to control it to the level that it exists with only radio frequency. And there's other technologies that work a lot better than radio frequency as well. So it isn't a science that has been solved completely, as I mentioned. And so now I'm going to get into how is it that we're able to control this plasma, or what are the processes or the things that we can do as students or as professors or as curious people to understand to control these processes in plasma. Well, one thing that interested me was, how do I get the temperature of this thing? How is it that this plasma thing that's as hot as the sun, how do I take the temperature? I can't put a piece of metal on it because it'll melt it. So how do I determine the temperature? And so during my PhD, again, I found out that there was this thing called optical emission spectroscopy, which essentially is what it sounds like. There's an emission of light from the plasma itself, similar to these lights that are here. And if you look at it with this tool, that's a spectrometer, you get this type of spectrograph. These columns here represent different things. In general, they're energy signals that exist within the plasma itself. And from those signals, and I didn't include the math because it was like 7 slides, but from those signals, you can essentially determine the rotational temperature, which for the type of plasma that we work with is close enough to the gas temperature itself. Now, I've been talking a lot about chemistry because, again, our main goal is that some chemistry or chemical reactions that exist require a certain amount of energy. Temperature is a function of energy as well, and so if we're able to determine the temperature, we're able to kind of calculate the energy, which allows us to control the process even further. And that allows us to control the chemistry, which allows us to optimize the processes for whether it's fertilizer or creating hydrogen from methane. It allows us to control that process. And so while we cannot change the temperature in the plasma, we can change the parameters such as the flow rate and the pressure, as well as the structure that we have inside of our plasma to create the specific spectra that will give us the chemistry that we want. Because on top of giving us temperature, these peaks can also represent ions. And the ions, again, are produced from the electrons interacting with the gas itself, these neutral species, as well as every other thing that I mentioned in the plasma itself. So these peaks not only give us temperature, but they give us an identification of what's inside of it and how those things are changing as a function of power. Okay? And so with this, there's a lot of material science involved as well. I haven't mentioned a lot of it, but our systems typically look like this. These are essentially made of brass, copper, stainless steel, and as well as aluminum. And so the main question becomes, how can we utilize our material science to further develop these systems and make them more efficient for a specific application? And what exactly can we take away from, again, this kind of plot? And so here, what we have is that plot turned into a gradient of temperature for the plasma itself. And so people want to know, does this thing actually work? Well, yes, we can measure it, create this beautiful picture or map of the temperature itself, and utilize it to show that different flow rates and different powers allow us to create a different plasma, which allows us to create a different chemistry, which allows us to do a different application. And so one application I didn't mention, and I want to mention it before I move on to the next slide, is we can utilize, and it is utilized for specifically this, is growing diamonds. So for those people that are interested in jewelry, this is the science that's utilized to grow diamonds as well. And the way that it works is instead of having a flow rate, you have essentially a microwave-shaped box where you create a miniature sun using methane and a hydrogen plasma. And a ratio between those two allow you to essentially have a seeded diamond and grow it from a small tiny seed into whatever carat size you want it. Now you can't do it overnight, but it will take a few weeks at least to make something decent size, and a few months if you want something that's of a much higher carats. And so these diamonds are 100% real, and they're just cheaper to make because you don't have to go dig for them. You can make them in the lab. We work with companies that do that. We work with companies that are now creating the fertilizer. We work with companies that, again, create the chips. And so these are just a few things that currently exist within the world of plasma. And so the question that I think most students have, or I would have as a student, is what can you do, right? What can you do as a student? Can you get in this field? It's not taught anywhere. How do I get involved in all of this? And so the cool thing is that I'm currently working with a bunch of universities right now to create a program that's essentially is a pipeline between universities, as I'm hoping community colleges, that will allow us to essentially have you guys train either within the community college, CSU, or UC system, and have training in this plasma stuff. Currently, we were awarded this grant from the National Science Foundation called Excellent that allows us to do that in the next 3 years. So for the next 3 years, if you're transferring or planning to transfer to UC Merced, Fresno State, or Cal Poly Pomona, we are in partnership with them in developing this program, and essentially 8 people every year will have the opportunity to go through essentially a set of workshops, and then ultimately in the summer an internship that will allow you to practice this stuff in real-time setting at our company here, as well as our partner with Applied Materials who focus on semiconductors or chip production. And the last thing here is we want to be the PPPL of the West Coast. What that means is we have the Princeton Plasma Proportion Laboratory in the East Coast. That's the United States hub for plasma research. And we don't have one on this side. So the goal is for us to build this using this grant as a foundation and try to obtain more funding, have state-of-the-art equipment, hopefully one day, and have that here in the Central Valley so that it can help us grow here as well. And so that's the talk I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, this QR code links directly to my LinkedIn. So feel free to message me with anything, and I'm free to stay here until whatever time if you have any questions. Thank you.
I have a baby question here. Since this is the fourth state of matter, but the way you've described what you get, I'm trying to picture plasma. I picture it as gelatinous. But it makes diamond, it makes gases, it makes other things. What is the state?
The state is instead of a gas, is now ionized. So there's still gas in there, but it's a fraction of it. So it's a fraction of gas, a fraction of ions, which are these active things that make the chemistry occur, and neutral species, which are just random atoms that are either created through collisions or created through reactions that exist. And so you could think of all of that within this beam of light that I have here. Through any of these beams of light, you can think of all that as being mixed in there. And on top of that, you also have light. So light is photons, right? These photons are what we see right now. So the only reason we could see it is because of the photons. But within this light itself, you have the combination of all these things I just mentioned. And so it's not about picturing it because it's at the atomic level, but understanding that it exists and that it's a mixture of all of them. It's not just a single thing, and you can't touch it. There's cold plasmas, there's hot plasmas, and you could even touch these and nothing will happen to you as well, yeah.
So when, the reason I'm asking is because when you're talking about like some of these applications, like using it for fertilizer, so it has to be like an on-site thing. You're producing it and it is pipelined.
Yeah, yep.
And it feeds the, I'm sorry, I forgot.
So yeah, the way it would work is, the way I design a reactor for this is quite easy and or not easy, but straightforward. In the beaker, it's full of water. This is full of water. If you were to freeze frame a pipe, let's say you cut a pipe in half and you have water flowing, you freeze frame a piece of that pipe, now you have the same thing I have up here. Now, if you were to start shooting it with this kind of almost like laser or lightsaber kind of looking thing, it would start reacting with the water itself and injecting these nitrates and ammonia molecules in the water itself. You wouldn't see it.
That are captured, right?
Yeah, so the air itself.
Captured from the air.
Correct. So first it would break those down, and then it would touch the water and react with it. So whatever it touches, it's what it reacts with. So if the gas itself is creating reactions on its own, but when it comes into interaction with something else, let's say water, then it breaks down the H2O molecules as well. So you'll have a few hydrogen atoms, and that's why you have NH3 and NHNO3, because you're breaking down the molecules of water and making more reactions. So the oxygen and nitrogen have some reactions already on their own in the plasma, just without interaction. Once they come in contact with the water, now you're breaking down the water and the air because that's how much energy the plasma has. And so that's allowing us to create the fertilizer or the increase of the nutrients in the water itself. Yeah.
We can tell them we can't do this at home.
You can do this at home.
Blow it up.
It won't blow up. That's the cool part is...
Chemical engineer, they blow things up.
Oh.
Even when they don't mean to.
We first discussed this in the 70s. You've brought it several generations forward now.
Yeah. There's not a lot, but yeah, that's the goal, is trying to make it into a thing, hopefully a curriculum one day here.
We talked about plasma etching at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's still a thing, and we're still pushing that towards hopefully the quantum level. That's the next step, I
I
think.
think there's another 100 years to go.
Oh yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
Professor, what did you mean when you said that hydrogen has different flavors?
So when you break down methane itself, so there's different hydrogen ions themselves, and those hydrogen, depending on how you quench the gas, you'll produce a different type of hydrogen, similar with methane and every other gas. It's not always pure, you could say. So 100% nitrogen is different than 89% nitrogen purity. And that's what I mean. And so sometimes the gas itself will emit a different color based on the purity of the gas itself. And the purity is just a function of how are you obtaining the gas, how are you breaking down the methane. That's what I meant by different flavors. It's just the concentration of the hydrogen itself and how clean it is.
For like industry purposes, is it like efficiency over purity or how?
It's both. You have to. That's why I said that the process itself is what matters. In industry, they're looking for both efficiency and purity. So you have to really be good at understanding how plasma breaks down the gas, the energy, and I'll go a little bit deeper, but the electron and the ion energy distributions, how that is essentially acting on the gas. Or thereafter, and how you're capturing it as well, because the method that you capture it, there's still recombination. So like molecules that are broken down by plasma can still recombine and create the same thing or different derivatives of it. And so it really depends on the process itself at the end. Yeah.
How it acts afterwards?
Yep.
Thank you.
What was the water filter you're going to be using? I think you mentioned that. It was $600.
Oh no, that's just a system I designed that cost $600 that was able to essentially do the fertilizer thing. Yeah. If you want more info, I can send it to you. Just email me. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for attending. We'll see you hopefully next week for our next talk.
I didn't see you were waiting for the doors to open and wanted to I don't know if it was.
Yeah, I did put a sign over there too. I don't know if someone might have taken it down.
Yeah,